Hello. So this is a short video explaining the idea. So let's say you have person A. And person A he knows two things. He knows X and Y. And now there is person B. Person B, he knows X, Y, Z, something like that. So now let's say we have a book, and we're gonna call this book B. Now, person writing this book will think, well, I need to work with this demographic of people who know X. So I guess I need to they already know X, so there's no need to explain this. So you just remove this part, and we'll just write a little paragraph here that says, this book assumes that you know X. So now I can explain why. That's great. So now book goes on into explaining why, and books also has some original material where they explain Z, and they also explain W and W prime. Now it turns out that the book is very interesting. So it's got some very useful knowledge about W and W prime. But to the person reading it, like if there is a person here that, let's say, doesn't know X, well, let's just say this person knows nothing, really. He's just like the empty set. In comparison to this book, this guy knows nothing. I'm not saying this guy doesn't know how to read. What I'm saying is that none of the knowledge in this book is described here, but he's also lacking some very important conceptual things that are needed in order to understand the book. So this person cannot use this book because the book didn't explain X. So if only the book had explained X, then this person could use the book, but it turns out it didn't. So I'm thinking maybe some authors will think, oh no, they don't know how to code. We need to explain how to code, so they add more stuff. Oh, they don't know what computers are. Oh, we need to explain what computers are. Oh, they don't know what a number is. Oh, we need to explain what a number is. And then suddenly, then the book is now usable because it explained A, B, C all the way to, I guess, S, T, U, V, W, whatever. Now the book is 1,000 pages long. And then, so now it's a work. So the publishers like that because they measure it in weight. And they go, great, but no one's going to read it. Can you make it shorter? So now the guy has to say, okay, so we can't really explain what a number is. We can't really explain what a computer is. And I guess people don't know how to code. They just need to read another book. So I guess we should just maybe cut this in half. Or in any case, the problem is that the process of writing will I don't know, because I haven't written books, but my guess is that it probably involves a lot of rewriting and people deciding what goes in and what doesn't go in, and that takes a lot of thoughtful work. And in addition to this, then you're thinking about what does the person know, what does the person not know, what should be the requirements of the book. Then we have a market, and it turns out that the people who only need to know W and W1 are a very small market, but the people that don't know how to code, they're actually a bigger market. So you may be economically more wise to actually explain all this stuff, because it turns out a lot of people don't know a lot of stuff. That's kind of the point of books, I guess. So this problem is that, let's say you produce the book that has all the stuff. Let's say you produce a book that goes from A all the way to W prime. Awesome, beautiful body of work. But it turns out that this body of work for the first 800 pages is really boring to people who already know all this stuff. And then so people start reading it and go, I already know this. I already know. Oh, that's a nice little trick here in page 300. Oh, that's a nice little thing on page 600. But the total value of work that they get from a book like this is gonna be it's gonna have diminishing returns if they already read a bunch of books that look like this one. As a result, then the people will say, this is, and they'll probably abandon at some point here. So the problem is, if you give people something that they already know, they'll be bored. And if you give them something they don't know, then they'll be interested. But if you give them something they don't know, but that depends on other stuff that they also don't know, then they will be unable to read it. So essentially, the problem is that the book is not tailored to each individual person. So, what will happen if before reading the book, then the person were to fill a poll? Just a couple questions. So, do you know? I'm gonna ask a question. If you answer a question correctly, I will know that you know A. So, do you know A? So, what I'm saying is like not do you know A, because people might say yes, but then you have a different concept than I do about A. So I'll just ask a very specific question. So, in the context of A, if A is true, then what will A be about A? So, some very specific questions, and then maybe some potential answers. So, ask some questions here. Ask some questions here in the, get the guy to answer some questions. And now I have a map of like, let's say this is Y, W, Y, W, Y. So I know that this guy knows A. So I'm not gonna explain A. I know that this guy knows B. I know that this guy, his understanding of C actually has some errors there. So he knows C, but he knows it like the wrong way. Like most people think C is da da da, but actually C is da da da. So this can be a thing. So like I'm gonna say half, and here let's say this guy is like this is a 1, this is a 0, this is a 0, this is a 0, and surprisingly this is a 1. So armed with this knowledge, I can craft or take all the pages in the book, and then just pick and choose just a subset and make a smaller book. This is a smaller book. It is interesting. It is not boring because it doesn't have any of the stuff you already know. And it is not impossible because it does have all the stuff that you need to know in order to know the other stuff. That is to say that there is a requirement graph. So if you know this, but you don't know this, and you don't know this, you don't know this, you don't know this, most likely, if I know that you don't know this, then I can infer by the fact that you don't know this concept that you're gonna need these other concepts before. And I apologize if my explanation is too abstract, but I'm trying to make it so that you can think about it in your own books. Like if you write about, I don't know, whatever it is you write about, then this makes sense. Now for me, mostly about math and maybe programming, so I'm gonna use math and programming examples. So let me provide another example where this idea might be useful. Let's say, for instance, you have a book about web design that tailors two categories. We have the designers and we have the programmers. So the programmer, so I have some design, programming, design. So this is the programming design part, this is the design part, this is the programming part. Or like, okay, maybe I said it one way, draw it another, whatever. Still, the point is, to the programmer, these programming parts will be really boring because like he already knows how to write code. He doesn't need you to tell him what an if statement is. To the designer, he already knows like the theory of color and like, I don't know, align shit together, whatever designers do. But there is some aspect here that they both can benefit from, but this prelude is important because if you're a designer, then you can learn a little bit how to code, and then you can learn about how to connect the code with your stuff. But then this part to the designer is gonna be really boring because like he doesn't need for you to tell him what he already learned in design school or like reading blogs. So like he doesn't care about this. So the way I envision the system is the designer enters the system, and then he gives me in terms of things he knows, doesn't know this. He knows this, and he knows like half of this. And these are the three sections, right? So section 1, section 2, section 3, or maybe chapter 1, chapter 2, I don't know. So the programmer on the other hand, so this is the designer. The programmer, a programmer, may say, well, I know how to code, so I don't need this, but about the design, I actually been doing a lot of design, so I know most of this stuff too. And this connection here, well, I actually know like most of it. So this guy here should get a book that is about like half the size of the book. So maybe like I don't know, depending on the relative sizes of the sections. This designer here, he should get a book that is maybe the total book is 300 pages. And maybe this guy will get a book that's 100 pages. So he will just enter the system, enter a poll, then docbook.sys XML magic, auto-generate, auto-clean, auto-filter. We remove all the relevant stuff. We just leave the cream of the cream, and we remove the unnecessary preludes. And then we just give him 100 pages of very good stuff. Now, for the grammar, it looks like this guy just has to read 25 pages. It's going to be more like a light reading, like an article, because he already, quote-unquote, knew most of the stuff. Now, there might be an aspiring designer developer, like this is a new guy. He's 15 years old, the world is new, and he hasn't written a line of code. He doesn't know anything about design, but like his dad likes it, so he wants to do it, and he just doesn't know any of this stuff. So for him, yeah, you get the 300 pages, my friend. You have to read the whole thing because you're a newcomer. So, and that's fine because all this is all new information. So, if you provide new information, people are interested. If you provide the same information over and over, then that means repetition. So if I repeat the same thing over and over again, then same thing over and over again, this is not information. This doesn't add new information to the person. But if I have different things, well, suddenly that's information. So all this stuff can be encoded as 1 times 10 plus this other thing. Meaning that if you repeat things over and over, that's uninteresting. But if you show new things all the time, then that's interesting. Because the brain tends to like, I don't know how to say. Maybe some brains tend to synthesize all the repeated stuff into the single thing. So if you commute from house to work 10 times, then the first time is new commute, you see new buildings, new cars. By the 10th time, the brain just turns off, and all the new information is like, it's not even new information, so brain ignores most of the commute time. So we can combine this idea with another idea, which is the level of abstraction. So let's talk about abstraction. So in my view, it would be very nice if I could control the level of abstractions of a book in real time by modifying a slider that controls how much abstraction there is in a book by using a little slider below the paragraph. So the way it will kind of look, you have some paragraph of text, and then there is a little slider here. And it turns out you're reading the text and you go, well, I don't understand any of this stuff. So what you do is that you move the slider a little bit to the right, so that it's less abstract, and suddenly the words move around in the screen. So previous words, they kind of fly into this place, and then the old words, they just fill in the empty space. So imagine an animation where words move around in the screen and then they reposition themselves, and then the new phrases come in, so that you can kind of keep track of where everything is very slowly. And now you have new stuff, so you can read the new stuff. You may say, well, that's interesting. Oh, there is even more information. Well, I'm actually really interested about this. So what else did the author have to say? Show me the footnotes. Show me the stuff in parentheses. Show me the trivia, the irrelevant stuff, the history of the thing. Show me the whole thing. I want it all. I want to know everything about this little thing. So the authors will write something, usually like they do is that they write, and then they write it very concisely, and then nobody gets it, so they have to explain it more. And then they have to, like, I don't know. So I think the way it works is that people write this, and then there's like cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting, right? My proposal is don't cut, but rather mark these are abstraction level 1, these are abstraction level 2, and this little guy here is abstraction level 6, meaning no one cares about it. But if someone really wants to read the whole story, like somebody really wants the maximum detail, and by that logic, then we can also have another level here with like a small amount of detail, just like, just a line, just a concept, just a main idea. Don't forget to brush your teeth. Don't forget to comment your code. Use good variable names, like I can talk about good variable names for hours, but if I were to just synthesize it into one thing. So the whole book on this level, the whole book can be just 10 commandments. one page. The book is one page. But if you scroll right into abstraction mode, then you move the slider and suddenly the book explains. It becomes like an article, like 10 pages. And then you move it further and the book becomes like, I don't know, let's go to the next level. Let's say this multiplies by 2 or something like that. So, I don't know, 20, 40, 50 pages, you know, like a meta filter thing. And then you scroll further down and now it's 500 pages of craft. So the idea here is, if users could control the level of abstraction, the level of detail that they get, that'll be great. So basically what it means is that you have to rewrite every paragraph in your book 6 times. You have to write the short version, the longer version, the super longer version, and I think that it might even help for you to have, well, this is the short version, this is the long version, very cool. So it's like an outline. So how will the system even work? Well, I don't know. But I've been thinking about one way it could work. So one way it could work is that you have questions. So like question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, which are from the poll at the beginning where the guy downloaded the book. He goes to a website and website says, okay, you're gonna download the book? Great. Can you please fill out this poll? By the way, you can get the whole book. Like if you want the whole book, you always get the whole book. Like don't worry. We'll give you the whole book. But if you want a shorter version of the book that kind of has all you need, all you have to do is answer these short questions. So we also have the paragraphs. So we have paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4. And this is probably the most time-consuming and complicated thing that the authors will have to do, is that for each paragraph they will have to do, well, if the person answered this question this way, then they most likely need to read this. But if, now these other questions, they have no relevance at all about this paragraph. If the person answered this question like, I don't know, correctly, let's say this means correct, right? So if the person answered correctly, then they need this. But if the person answered correctly, then they don't need this. And then you can have this matrix filled here with like, I don't know, like zeros and ones and like 0.5s and 3.9s and whatever. And then finally, this question, when you add all the numbers together, like all these numbers get multiplied by 1. And if you answer the question incorrectly, then all these questions get multiplied by 0. And then when you add the multiplication of the question times this matrix that relates the paragraphs to the questions, and that should give you some sums. So the sums here are going to be, let's say, sum, this is 2, and this is, so if you answer correctly here, incorrectly here, this is 1. So just multiply and add things together. I'm not really proposing any fantastic machine learning, magical, golden hammer thing. I'm just proposing, let's just make a matrix, multiply shit together. And here, then, after the person adds, I can know if this number here, if the sum is above a certain threshold, like if P1, according to all your questions, if P1 is above a certain threshold, then it's included in the book. But if it's not above the certain threshold, like this number, for instance, and I just made up because calculations are much, but whatever. Just, I guess a better way to explain it would be to have all the calculations be correct, but let's just ignore all the arithmetic for now and just pretend it's perfect. So the idea is, if the number of questions that the people answer corresponds to the paragraphs, and then the idea was presented correctly, if the paragraph doesn't go above the threshold, then that means, like, well, according to this matrix, like, you don't need to read it. Like, let's say a question was, do you know what, like, a colon equals 7 plus 9 is gonna print? The person answers this correctly. Well, I don't need to explain this, I don't need to explain this, like, you get it, right? So of course this will have like the possibility that maybe the person was overly enthusiastic and perhaps a little lucky with the questions, and he answered some questions incorrectly. Like, he answered the questions by mere luck, and then he ended up not being explained stuff. So that's one downside of this idea. So questions must be really well thought out, and there must be always an option in the question where he says, I don't know, or I'm not sure. You see, this is an option that has to exist, where the reader says, look, this is not an exam. We're not trying to figure out how smart you are. So don't try to impress us. If you're not sure, you say we're not sure. It's fine. If you're not sure, that's great, because I get to explain it to you and you'll be sure. So I think that this idea where you can tailor books to different audiences by just making sure that the right audiences get the right content. So this guy gets some content